All right, let's talk about some of those weird little things you do. The habits that might make you feel a bit odd. We're going to explore why those quirks could actually be signs that your brain is firing on all cylinders. I mean, be honest. Do you ever catch yourself in the middle of your day and just think, why am I like this? Maybe it's eating the exact same lunch for 3 years straight. Or maybe it's that feeling of needing to be in a dark, quiet room after a party that only lasted an hour. Well, here's the big idea for today. What if those things you see as flaws aren't flaws at all? What if they're actually features? Like special upgrades for a high-performance mind. Let's start looking at these habits in a totally new light. Okay, first up, the optimized mind. We're talking about how smart brains absolutely crave efficiency. So some habits that might look a whole lot like laziness, well, they're actually your brain's genius way of saving its A game for the stuff that really counts. This all boils down to something called decision fatigue. Think of your brain like a phone battery. Every single choice you make, even tiny ones like what socks should I wear, uses up a little bit of that juice. A smart brain knows this, and it instinctively tries to automate the small stuff to save that precious mental energy for the big, tough problems. And hey, this isn't just some theory. Look at Steve Jobs and his legendary black turtleneck, or Mark Zuckerberg and his closet full of gray t-shirts. They weren't trying to be fashion icons, not at all. They were building a system to get rid of pointless decisions so they could focus their entire brain power on changing the world. See? That kind of repetition isn't boring. It's a strategy. You know who else does this? The system builder. You know what I'm talking about? Spending an entire weekend setting up the most perfect, color-coded, hyperlinked productivity system known to man, only to completely abandon it by Wednesday. That's because for a sharp mind, the real joy, the intellectual rush, comes from the challenge of designing the perfect system. Actually using it day to day, that's just boring maintenance. So let's move on. This need for efficiency doesn't just apply to your wardrobe or your to-do list. It shows up in our social lives too. And sometimes what people label as antisocial is really just a sign of a mind that's, busy processing the world on a whole other level. And get this, it's backed by research. This might sound completely backward, but for people with higher intelligence, socializing more can actually lead to being less happy. It's not that they dislike people. It's just that their brains get so much satisfaction from deep thinking and creating. And that stuff, well, it often happens when you're by yourself. So if you find yourself getting incredibly bored during small talk about the weather, it's not because you're rude. It's because your brain is a supercomputer running on fiber optic internet, and the conversation is stuck on old school dial-up. You're ready for the big, juicy topics, and everyone else is just getting started. And what about constantly asking why? I mean, Socrates basically made a whole career out of it, right? If that's you, it's a sign of what's called low cognitive closure. It just means you don't need a quick, easy answer. You need to really understand things. You're not trying to be annoying, you're just wired to dig deeper. Of course, all that deep processing can sometimes make normal social stuff feel, well, awkward. Your brain can turn a simple handshake into a final boss battle. You're overanalyzing every tiny detail, every possible outcome, while everyone else is just, talking. But hey, minds like Einstein and Newton were famously awkward, so you're in pretty good company. All right, let's get into my favorite part, the unconventional creator. This is all about how a truly creative, intelligent mind just doesn't play by the normal rules of productivity. And yeah, this is where things can get a little messy. This quote from Douglas Adams just says it all, doesn't it? I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. If you're someone who does their absolute best work 2 hours before it's due, you know exactly what he means. This isn't a flaw, it's a finely tuned process. I mean, look at this process. It starts with waiting, then a healthy dose of panic, which triggers this incredible state of hyperfocus, and then somehow you absolutely nail it. For a lot of brilliant minds, that last-minute pressure is the only thing that can quiet all the other noise and let them tap into their best ideas. And what about when you do that work? If you're a night owl buzzing with creativity at 2 in the morning, you're not alone. Research has actually linked staying up late with higher creativity and abstract thinking. You're just part of a long line of geniuses, Mozart, Darwin, Churchill, who did their best work by moonlight. This one's fun. Do you ever tell a joke that you think is hilarious, it's full of clever wordplay, maybe a deep-cut reference, and it's just
Crickets? You might be a comedic genius trapped in a normie world. Seriously, a preference for complex humor is linked to higher intelligence. It's not a bad joke, you just have a tough crowd. And finally, for this section, throwing out the instruction manual. This isn't just you being stubborn. There's a psychological trait called need for cognition. It means your brain genuinely enjoys the act of figuring things out. Following a list of steps is boring. The real fun is in taking it apart and understanding how it works for yourself.
Okay, let's shift gears for our final section, and this one might be the most surprising. High intelligence isn't all about logic and efficiency. It has this incredibly deep, empathetic core that shows up in some really interesting ways.
Come on, you can admit it. Have you ever bumped into a chair or a table and instinctively said, "Oh, sorry"? It sounds kind of silly, but that little habit is actually a window into a totally different and powerful kind of intelligence.
The fancy word for this is anthropomorphism. It's when we give human traits to non-human things. And it turns out, people who do this tend to have way higher levels of empathy, creativity, and social intelligence. It's not childish. It's a sign that your brain is so rich with empathy that it just sort of spills over onto everything around you. So, we've looked at all these strange habits from a completely new angle. What's the big takeaway here? Well, it's pretty simple actually. It's time to embrace your quirks. That thing you thought was laziness? Nope, that's strategic procrastination. What felt antisocial? That's just your need for deep thinking. That messy desk? That's creative chaos. And that weird habit of talking to your plants? That's just your high empathy showing. See, they're not flaws, they're features. So I'll just leave you with this one question. The next time you catch yourself doing one of these things, just ask yourself, is this habit really weird, or am I just busy being brilliant?